The laughter still rings in my ears. It wasn't playful, not the kind that warms a room. It was sharp, cutting, and aimed straight at me. Thanksgiving dinner had always been awkward in his family's house, but this year was supposed to be different. I had brought a gift. Not flowers. Not a pie. A wheelchair, $2, $500 from my own savings, for my husband's dad, who'd just come home from surgery. I thought it would help. I thought it would mean something. Instead, he looked me dead in the face, his voice cold and steady. Return it. I'd rather crawl than owe a whore. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The table went silent, just for a beat. Then the sound came, first a snicker from my brother-in-law, then a chuckle from his wife, and finally, the full chorus of laughter. My own husband leaned back in his chair, grinning like it was the best joke of the night. I stared at him, waiting for something. A word, a defense, a hand reaching for mine under the table. Nothing. He just kept eating, eyes on his plate, as if I wasn't even there. I felt the sting rise in my throat, but I refused to give them that satisfaction. Slowly I stood. My chair scraped against the floor. I gathered the plates in silence, my hands steady even as my chest burned. No one offered to help. No one even looked my way. The wheelchair sat in the corner, untouched, like a symbol of my foolish hope. I wheeled it back toward the door, past the smirks and the sideways glances. No one stopped me. No one cared. Outside, the night air bit hard against my skin, but it felt cleaner than the air in that room. I loaded the chair back into my car and shut the trunk with more force than I meant to. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I sat there in the driveway, headlights cutting through the darkness. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stared at the house, the faint glow of laughter spilling out the windows, and thought, how did I ever believe I belonged here? Do you know what it feels like to stand in a room full of people you love, and realize you're the only one unwelcome? I didn't sleep that night. The silence of our bedroom was heavier than the laughter I had left behind. My husband slipped in after midnight, the smell of bourbon clinging to his clothes. He didn't ask where I'd gone or why the chair was missing from the living room. He just kicked off his shoes, crawled into bed and muttered, "Don't be dramatic." Dramatic. That word hit harder than his father's insult. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, counting every shadow that stretched across the plaster. My savings were gone. Months of double shifts at the clinic. The wheelchair had been meant as a bridge, a peace offering, a way to finally feel like I was part of this family. Instead, it had branded me an outsider, once and for all. In the morning, I went through the motions. Coffee, eggs, toast. He scrolled through his phone while I set the plate down. Not once did his eyes meet mine. "Don't take things so personally," he finally said, fork scraping against the pan. "You know how Dad is." I almost laughed. You know how Dad is. As if that excused the word he spat at me. As if it excused the way they all laughed. "You laugh too," I said quietly. He froze, fork halfway to his mouth. For a second, I thought guilt might flash across his face. Instead he shrugged. What was I supposed to do? Argue with my father at the dinner table? "No," I said, my voice steady. "You could have stood with your wife." The silence that followed said everything. I cleared his plate and set it in the sink. My hands moved on their own, washing, drying, stacking. Muscle memory filling the void where love used to live. He left for work without a goodbye, keys jingling as the door slammed shut. I stood in the kitchen, towel in hand, staring out the window. The neighborhood was waking up. Cars backed out of driveways, dogs barked at passing joggers, the mail truck rumbled down the street. Life went on, ordinary and unchanged. But inside me something shifted. They thought I would break. They thought I would shrink into silence. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. Because what they didn't know was that every laugh, every insult, every careless word, it all leaves a trace. And sometimes, traces lead exactly where they're not supposed to. By Monday morning, I had returned the wheelchair. The store clerk gave me a receipt and a quiet nod, like he understood more than I was willing to say. I folded the paper and slipped it into my purse. Back at the house, I tucked it into a drawer beneath old tax forms. My husband wouldn't notice. He never opened drawers unless he needed cash. The house was too quiet. He had left for work again without a word, and I was alone with the hum of the refrigerator and the ache in my chest. I should have felt relief. I should have been glad to have the money back in my account. Instead, all I felt was empty. I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through my phone. That's when I saw it. An email from the security company. Your monthly statement is ready. I'd almost forgotten. His parents had bragged last year about installing new security cameras around their property. Front door, backyard, even the garage. They were proud of it, said it was smart living. The account had been set up in my husband's name, but we shared the email. I clicked. The portal loaded, slow and deliberate, like it knew the weight of what I was about to see. Rows of timestamps appeared, each marked with tiny thumbnails. Thanksgiving night. Backyard view. Garage view. Living room view. Curiosity pulled me in. I clicked one at random. There they were. His father in his recliner, beer in hand, laughing with the others long after I'd left. My husband too. Not a trace of discomfort on his face. Just comfort. Like I had never existed. Another file loaded automatically. This one from the driveway. The truck screeched into view, my brother-in-law behind the wheel. He swung the door open and staggered out, clearly drunk. The camera caught him stumbling, cursing, nearly dropping the keys. I watched in silence. Then another angle. The garage. My sister-in-law slipped inside, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice carried enough to catch. Yeah, she left. I told you she'd crack. She laughed, high-pitched and cruel. Each clip was like a thread unraveling. Piece by piece, I saw what I wasn't meant to see. Their real faces when they thought no one was watching. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the screen flickering across my hands. For the first time in days, my chest didn't feel so heavy. Because sometimes, truth doesn't need to be spoken. Sometimes, it just needs to be seen. I didn't tell him what I had found. Not yet. Instead, I carried on like nothing had changed. Breakfast on the table, clothes folded on the bed, small talk about the weather. He barely noticed me anyway, which made it easier to move in silence. At night, when he slept heavy with the TV still humming, I would slip out of bed and sit at the kitchen table with my laptop. The security portal became my secret window. Every clip told me something new. His father's cruel jokes. His brother's recklessness. His mother's whispers about me when she thought the camera was too far to catch her words. It was like peeling back wallpaper to see what rotted underneath. One clip stopped me cold. The living room camera, same night. My husband leaned against the wall, drink in hand. His father chuckled. She really thought she belonged here. The others laughed. But my husband's response, steady, unflinching, was worse than the insult itself. She doesn't know her place. She never will. I froze the frame, the glow of his smirk burning into me. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just about one night, one insult, one cruel laugh. It was about years of being dismissed, years of being less than. And it wasn't going to end with me pleading for a seat at their table. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I downloaded the files, one by one, each clip tucked neatly into a folder I labeled simply, Truth. By the end of the week, I had hours of footage. Enough to paint the full picture. Enough to show anyone who doubted me exactly what they were. But it wasn't just about exposure. Revenge, at least the kind that mattered, wasn't loud. It wasn't shouting in their faces or storming out with slammed doors. It was quiet. Precise. Undeniable. So I waited. I went to work at the clinic, smiled at patients, clocked in and out. I came home, cooked dinner, kissed his cheek like nothing was wrong. Inside, though, I carried the weight of their words, their laughter, their betrayals. And with each passing day, it grew lighter, not heavier. Because I wasn't holding on to pain anymore. I was holding on to proof. And sooner or later, proof has a way of finding the right audience. The chance came sooner than I expected. His mother called one afternoon, her tone sugar-sweet. We're having everyone over this weekend. Just a small get-together. You'll come, won't you? I stared at the phone, her voice in my ear. A week earlier, she'd called me clingy on camera. A week earlier, she'd laughed at me behind closed doors. But now she wanted me at her table again. Yes, I said softly. Of course. When I hung up, my hands were steady. I opened my laptop, checked the files one more time, and slid a small flash drive into my purse. Saturday evening, the house was lit up like nothing had ever happened. Candles on the table, football humming in the background, plates of food stacked high. I carried a pie into the kitchen, placed it neatly on the counter, and forced a smile when my father-in-law grunted in my direction. My husband barely looked at me. He was too busy retelling the story of his brother's drunken antics, making everyone laugh. My chest tightened, but not from pain. From patience. When the laughter finally died down, I spoke. "I brought something for you all." Their eyes shifted. For a moment, I think they expected another gift. Another desperate attempt to be included. But instead, I set the flash drive on the table. "Just watch." Confusion rippled through the room. My brother-in-law rolled his eyes. My mother-in-law asked, "What is this supposed to be?" "Truth," I said simply. I slipped the drive into the TV's USB port before anyone could stop me. The screen flickered. And then it began. The backyard clip. My brother-in-law stumbling, nearly falling. The garage clip. My sister-in-law mocking me on the phone. The living room, my husband's voice, cold and sure. "She doesn't know her place." The room went still. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just stood by the counter, watching their faces pale one by one. No one laughed this time. My husband shifted in his seat, jaw tight. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is," he muttered. But the damage was already done. His father's smirk had vanished. His mother's hands trembled on her glass. His brother pushed back from the table, face flushed with embarrassment. I picked up my purse, slipped the flash drive back inside, and said quietly, "I don't need a seat at this table." And then I walked out. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to a small motel on the edge of town. $49 for a single room, clean sheets, and silence. I lay on the bed, staring at the popcorn ceiling, the glow of the security footage still fresh in my mind. For the first time in months, I felt steady. Not happy. Not free. Just steady. My phone buzzed. 10 missed calls. All from him. I turned it face down. By morning, the messages started. "Where are you? You embarrassed me. Come back and fix this." The last one made me laugh. Quiet. Bitter. Fix this. The only thing broken was the lie they'd built together, and I wasn't the one who shattered it. At work, I poured coffee, checked vitals, smiled at patients. No one knew the storm brewing inside me. And that was the point. Silent revenge doesn't announce itself. It moves like air, unseen, but impossible to ignore once it shifts. That evening, I drove past their house. Lights were on in every room. Through the window, I could see them sitting stiff at the table. No laughter this time. My husband's father slammed his fist against the armrest. His mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. My husband paced, phone in hand, looking lost. I didn't stop. I didn't knock. I just kept driving. Later that week, I went to the bank. Quietly, carefully, I shifted the savings I still had into a separate account. One he didn't know existed. I wasn't running yet, but I was preparing. At night, when the motel walls closed in, I replayed his words in my head. She doesn't know her place. Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't. But what he never understood was this. My place wasn't at their table, waiting for scraps of respect. My place wasn't beside him, shrinking every time he chose silence over love. My place was wherever I decided to stand. And soon, he'd realize just how far from him that really was. The motel became my refuge. A week passed before I set foot back in the house. When I did, it was only to collect what was mine. The air inside felt stale, like a place where nothing honest could breathe. My husband stood in the kitchen, phone on the counter, eyes heavy from lack of sleep. "You can't just leave like that," he said flatly. "People are talking." I almost laughed. Not about the insult, not about the humiliation, not even about his silence at that table. No, he cared about people talking. "I didn't leave," I replied. "I walked away." He leaned against the counter, trying to look calm. "It wasn't that serious." I looked him in the eye. "You called me less than. On camera. In front of your family. Tell me again, it's not serious." His mouth opened but no words came.
The silence stretched until the hum of the refrigerator felt louder than his breathing.
I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just packed. Clothes, shoes, documents, each item folded and stacked neatly in my bag. He watched, but didn't stop me. When I zipped the bag shut, I turned to him one last time. You had a choice that night. You chose them. The weight of the words settled in the room. I didn't wait for his reply. By the next morning, I had moved into a small apartment above the bakery downtown. The rent wasn't cheap, but it was mine. No one laughed at me when I turned the key in the lock. No one questioned whether I belonged. I carried the flash drive with me, though I didn't need to play it anymore. Its existence was enough. Proof doesn't have to scream. It only has to sit quietly in the right hands. Word spread faster than I expected. Neighbors whispered. Customers at the bakery gossiped. His family's smiles cracked in public, their polished image slipping under the weight of what people had seen, what people now believed. And me? I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I just lived. Sometimes, the sharpest revenge isn't fire. It's absence. It's silence where they expected please. It's standing tall where they wanted you small. And I was done being small. Winter settled over town like a heavy coat. Streets were lined with holiday lights, storefronts glowing with cheer. For the first time in years, I walked through it all without feeling like a shadow. The bakery downstairs smelled of cinnamon and coffee. The landlord slipped me an extra loaf of bread some nights, saying I reminded him of his daughter. I smiled politely, grateful in ways words couldn't cover. Life wasn't perfect. The rent stretched me thin, the long shifts at the clinic left me drained. But each evening, when I turned the key to my own door, I knew I was free. Meanwhile, their house became quieter. I didn't need cameras to know it. Whispers reached me everywhere I went. How the proud father avoided neighbors now, how the mother's church friends stopped inviting her to luncheons, how my husband looked smaller each day he walked into town. They weren't ruined. They were simply exposed. And exposure, once lit, never fades. One afternoon, I ran into my husband outside the grocery store. He looked older, as if months had carved years into his face. His voice cracked when he said, "You should come home." I met his eyes calmly. "I am home." He didn't argue. He just lowered his gaze and walked away, groceries rattling in his hands. I stood there a moment longer, then turned back toward my apartment. The truth is, I hadn't planned any of this. I hadn't plotted their downfall like some grand scheme. All I did was hold up a mirror and let them see themselves. Sometimes that's all it takes. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke early, made coffee, and sat by the window as snow fell softly against the glass. Across town, I imagined them gathering again, table heavy with food, laughter thinner than ever. And for the first time, I didn't wonder if they missed me. Because I didn't need their seat. I had built my own table. And at that table, I was finally enough.